Techno music was created in Detroit back in the mid to late 80s, and it's credited to Juan Atkins, Derrick May, and Kevin Saunderson.
If you ask somebody from Detroit that was around in the beginnings of the music, what is techno music, they would say, oh, that's Derrick, that's Juan, that's the guys.
Rock, we got alternative rock, so why we can't have alternative, urban alternative or alternative soul?
They took aspects of gospel, they took aspects of blues, they took all that, and they just took it and just molded it and deconstructed it and made it into this form that's unbelievable.
Every piece of music has an open door that intersects with another sound.
Fuck all the fluffy IDM, all that crazy shit. This is the real facts of how this shit started.
It was just breaking overseas. There wasn't money, there wasn't fame. It was just music. And it was just futuristic music and sounds that you'd never heard before.
You say Detroit techno and it means something to people. It triggers an emotional response more than just a genre.
Techno music is underground dance music. You know, high-tech soul.
Detroit can be a heaven for some, it can be a hell for others.
This is the back of the house where the stuff got made. I think it has to be said that Detroit is an unrelenting success story.
Detroit is a weird city in that it doesn't have, it might be a big city, but it doesn't have the big city mentality.
In a city like Detroit, where it's as desolate as it could be, it's not a horrible city, but it's just it's a horribly designed city.
In a way, there's not much down here, but there's a heart, and there's something that makes it much more than what you see.
We don't have a thriving, bustling downtown area where all the tourists go and they go do the shopping and hang out at the club. We don't have that.
Detroit is lovely. Detroit is beautiful.
Now you got to realize, at the time in Detroit, you're talking about serious economic downturn, recession from the early 80s. They were still getting over oil embargoes and whatnot from the 70s. There was the white flight, there was divestiture from the city. Downtown was laying in shambles.
The white flight of Detroit is a myth in the sense that there was no such thing as flight. Flight denominates a sudden pattern of behavior like a flight of birds taking up off of a pond. By 1953, the city of Detroit had already established the patterns of ex-urban depopulation that people associate with post-1967. The U.S. government were involved in making it advantageous for people under the aegis of the GI Bill, for example, not to come back and live in cities after the Second World War, but to move to suburbia. The city was completely built. That is the point then, if you wanted a new house, you had to move to suburbia.
We were your classic Rust Belt city. Everybody moved to the burbs, a lot of vacant buildings, a lot of burnt out hulls.
So to say in 1967 something terrible happened, those people, whoever those people are, did something awful to my city and now I had to leave is simply nonsense. That's a bunch of nostalgic rot.
The city was fast becoming majority black. We didn't have a lot of resources.
What happened in 1967 specifically in Detroit is that a long pattern of exclusionary practices and a long pattern of segregation, both legal and quasi-legal in the city, simply erupted into violence.
How do you feel about it? I think that if they pull the troops out, then detention would be all over and everybody would go back to normal.
And those who engage in looting or arson or sniping or other illegal actions will have to pay the consequences.
All I can say is, I hope it ends quickly.
Then it became convenient to say, that's why we did what we did, instead of investigating the actual reasons why we did what we did. That is, we decided to depopulate cities at the end of World War II. We didn't decide to depopulate cities the day after the so-called riot in 1967. When somebody asks me, will the city ever come back? I tell them, it's back. It never went anyplace. You left, maybe, but the city never did.
Y'all the ones that left. No, we here.
City's still here. Now, of course, the city has economic problems, social problems, etc. Right, okay. The city is doing as well as could be expected and probably better. for what has happened. Capital left, the tax base, or a big piece of it left.
Imagine a city that was designed for 4 million people that less than 1 million people only occupy now.
We were brought up on our parents going to work every day and working in the car automotive industry and coming back home and telling us that they worked with robots.
There was a lot of fallout based on things switching over to automation and computers and robotics taking over, where people once worked and thrived. But it wasn't really a bad thing. It was just the city was in transition to a technological base.
People don't have money to buy food or clothing or other things, necessities and luxuries that we like to enjoy, then these attitudes usually come out in our music.
What has happened is that something extraordinary and wonderful and unique has happened instead of what every other city has. We got space. And it's not just space that's empty, it's space that's full of the artifacts of American industrial culture. It's a place like no other. It provides food for people's imaginations in a way that no other site does. And it has a great deal to do with the insertion of urban techno into this cultural and social domain.
We have 3 incredible natural resources: fresh water, salt, and techno.
I do not remember Detroit changing since I was a little boy. That's when there was people walking on the street. That's when there was businesses on the street. That's when there was some sort of social level here. You could actually meet people. There are some really fascinating people in the city, but you'll never meet them because nobody walks. Nobody walks. Nobody talks, and so nobody walks. So nobody talks, nobody walks, nobody walks, nobody talks.
It can get pretty boring at times. And so, you know, in order to pass the time or to get out of that, you have to find other things to do.
I'm 38 years old. I haven't seen any change. You know, in 28 years, nothing. 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 Nothing! The only change that I've really seen here is us. You know, we have changed, but the city has not.
Detroit's a tough city. It's had a rough time historically, and it's almost like the eye of a storm that just had never, you know, recovered.
But that's what makes Detroit, and the whole underground thing and the whole sound, because it's a deprived sound trying to get out, you know.
Because we had all of our major impressions gave us the impression that this is the way the rest of the world was. And you're coming from a city like Detroit, if you don't leave here, you don't know. There's something here, and something happens on a creative level here that doesn't seem to happen anywhere else.
Detroit, you won't find it anywhere but here. And the people are what keeps it so animated.
You know, being a kid in Windsor back in like 86, 87, if you wanted to, you know, find anything different, you ended up coming to Detroit.
When I go out of town and then tell people I'm from Detroit, the reaction I get is like either they're really scared of me instantly, or they say, why do you live there?
There's an attitude that you get coming from this city that you don't get nowhere else.
Who would ever have thought of making music with an old turntable and a scratchy record and sticking it in an abandoned warehouse or an abandoned factory site? I'll tell you who thought of it, people in Detroit. That's who did.
Techno, the first time I heard the word was probably through Juan Atkins.
It came about from Alvin Toffler's Future Shock. The Techno Rebels is where that term comes from, and it's because they took technology and they made it a black secret.
Juan was the one that came out and emphatically said techno.
And at first, the compilation was going to be called The House Sound of Detroit. But the track that I submitted was called Techno Music. And listened to the lyrics and they said, oh, well, we got to change the name of this record. And it was called The Techno Sound of Detroit.
I mean, it literally, you know, I don't know, it was like 100-point type on the album cover, you know, techno with an exclamation point. I mean, it was There was no turning back from there.
And the record was huge in Europe. And one of the singles to come off of that album was Big Fun. And that record like went #1 in the UK.
Basically, techno is usually 4 on the floor, boom, 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 boom. With the tick, boom, tick, boom, tick, boom, tss, tss. That's more house, tss, tss, boom, with the 4 on the floor. Okay, this is the 303. Like this is a 606 and a 202. These are just like, they look like toys, but they really can do a lot of damage if you're making it good. And then you have break beats, which are different breaks from old records or whatever you can find, and they speed them up and they put a loop to them. It's like boom, 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 spat, boom, spat, spat, boom, spat, boom, spat, spat, boom. Jungle is more boom, 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 boom. That's more like the jungle sound. I probably don't know what the hell I'm talking about, and you probably don't know what the hell I'm talking about, but somehow we'll get there, right?
Things have been influencing, I think, this sound since guys like Raymond Scott and the Manhattan Research Project.
Kraftwerk has to be given an acknowledgement because everybody thought they were a joke.
Basically, techno, the deep, deep roots are like Kraftwerk, Soul Sonic Force.
From disco, Giorgio Moroder. I mean, that's the first time we heard tech stuff.
And I was listening to this music with him, records from Kraftwerk and Sly Stone and Cameo and just music in general, you know.
You have to name, I think you have to name them all. You cannot expose one person.
There was a lot of electronic music. There was Depeche, I mean, I'm not going to go down the line because I can't. I mean, I can't, I'm not, there's Depeche Mode, Thompson Twins, New Order. There were all these type of groups that were making very, very electronic-only type of music.
We just coined the phrase techno, but we were definitely influenced by a lot of the Euro sound.
A lot of my early music, I mean, of course, George Clinton, P-Funk, that whole thing, I grew up with that, and that was like the group for me.
Post-high school years, early college years, everybody got turned on by Chicago. Chicago was the exact forerunner of what the music is today, as far as the concept of really taking some raw spaces, taking some raw systems, taking some raw jocks and some raw music and beating the heck out of it until it just took us over.
The innovators of techno per se, of course the guys from Detroit, you had Juan, Kevin, and Derrick.
Kevin, Juan, and Derrick.
Derrick and Juan and Kevin are truly the masterminds behind that. If it wasn't for them, there would be no techno.
The guys who started it all for me.
They're remarkable talents.
You know, they were just doing it because they loved doing what they did, but I never thought at any moment that it was going to be the phenomenon of what it's become.
I want to say a special thanks. Juan isn't here tonight, but without Juan, he's the originator. Derrick is the innovator. They call me the elevator. And we worked as a team, and we're just truly blessed.
They were doing just phenomenal stuff with these makeshift living room studios, and they were producing some of the hardest core house music that you would ever have heard.
It's not easy to do that. I mean, a lot of the stuff early stuff that Derrick and some of those guys did were triggered. Man, it took hours to do that kind of stuff.
You know, it wasn't alternative, it wasn't electro, it was something in between. And the more I heard it, the more like, you know, that kind of grabbed me and kind of pulled me in deeper and deeper and deeper until I was in the middle of it all.
And I call them the masters because they mastered the art of putting all that music together and making you dance for 6 or 7 hours straight and taking you wherever they wanted you to go.
Before any of that even became music, you know, for the masses to hear, I thought that it was, I thought those guys were onto something then, but they just took it just to a whole nother level. Whole nother level.
The person who probably was the most influential for me was Juan. Juan Atkins has changed a lot of people's lives, and I'm sure he knows it, but he's the one.
You know, Juan is on a whole different level.
Juan Atkins is the person who put all of these crazy ideas of doing electronic music in Detroit into any of our heads.
Juan is a creative genius.
And actually his track, The Chase, was the track that influenced me to make music.
Juan was definitely the most influential, who got the curiosity going about this electronic style of music.
Some of the highest highs I've ever experienced in my life were with Juan Atkins at the wheels.
Juan was always the quiet, really quiet type. I didn't even realize he made music until, you know, after knowing him maybe a year and a half. I happened to go by the studio. Juan had a studio, and Derrick took me by there unexpectedly. That's when I knew he was doing something pretty creative.
My last 2 years in high school, I learned how to read and write music. Took music theory courses, Theory 1, Theory 2. Right after I graduated, I made my first record.
He was making records when nobody knew about this music. So he spent, some of his best years have been spent just trying to help develop the music. You know, just trying to put the music on a level where it existed.
After I graduated, I met this guy, Rick Davis, and we both formed this group called Cybertron and released a record called Alleys of Your Mind.
One night, Juan Atkins came to him. They had this tape, dun, 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 and I was listening to it. I said, wow, man, I like this. Told them to hold on 1 second, and they were sitting out in the lobby, and we had a radio in the lobby. All of a sudden, they heard their song come on the radio, and it blew their minds. Blew my mind, too.
It had the P-Funk, just round, resonant rubber band bass line to it, wow, 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 right? And then this uplifting, utopian chords and stuff. And it just, people would bug. You play that track in any club in Detroit and you got an instant party.
And started Metroplex and another group, myself, which I call Model 500. And I started this label and released my first Model 500 record around '85 called No UFOs and The Future.
See, Juan take his intake and Cybertron is a more spiritual. See, this is what a lot of kids miss. It's a spiritual intake. It's spiritual. And he broke some shit down to me that I can't even regurgitate that shit back to you.
Hearing a Juan Atkins do Clear. That track is anthemic to people in London. It's anthemic to Mike Banks of Underground Resistance here. It's anthemic to me.
Even though he was only a few months older than me, it was like a mentorship. He was there for me when I was developing and working on my first music. He gave me the insight and the development, you know, and the confidence as well to make music.
rest of the world just caught up. They're just starting to acknowledge what this individual did.
Kevin's the guy who basically made sure that the music got to the masses.
Is one of the coolest guys I know, the most down-to-earth person I know, especially considering what he's done for the music and the things that he's into, and I have a lot of respect for what he did with Inner City, and I mean, he was one of the first guys who had like a crossover hit. He sold, I don't know how many records, 6 million records worldwide or something like that. He is obviously the most successful, commercially successful out of all of them.
Kevin, on the other end, was the first person who gave me a name to put on the record.
Kevin spanks. When he starts bumping, it's a spanking, and you just start screaming more, you know.
My influences were pretty broad, I think, but dance-wise, disco-related stuff with a consistent pulse always seemed to grab my attention more.
I remember we did a club on a Monday night called Spectrum with Paul Oakenfold many years ago, and one of the biggest records was Good Life.
You wanna go, it's a good life. Hey, yeah. I wanna stand around and let you just don't say no.
I have to say my career really started about 1983. The reason I think I started is because of Derrick May.
Let me clear this up real quick. Kevin told you that he took me down back in the day, right? You know, okay.
We had a little fight before we became friends.
Yeah. That's how we met.
Derrick used to get on my nerves, basically. He was, you know, he was always off with the mouth.
Fucking asshole. Yeah, he beat me up.
And I beat him up.
Well, let me see. I can't really top that because that did happen. But the circumstances weren't as he told them, whatever he may have told you. He actually tapped me on the shoulder, and when I turned around, he punched me. So it wasn't as if we were out in the yard, two guys going at it, and he took me down. This guy, this bigger than me guy, okay, everybody in the school knew he was gonna do it. So he walked up to me, he tapped me on the shoulder, because I think we had bet on the Super Bowl. And I decided I wasn't gonna pay him, you know? So he tapped me on the shoulder, I turned around and he socked me in the nose and hit me in the mouth. He knocked me out, you know? That's right, but somehow from that, I don't know how it's possible, but we became best friends.
Became the best of friends, which is amazing. I think, you know, he said, I'm just not gonna say nothing about this guy anymore. You know, I was big too.
Fucking Kevin, you should kill him. But see, now I'm, you know, I'm a little bit quicker and faster than him now. You know, so I can get inside and boom, boom, boom. Isn't that strange? Isn't that weird? God gave me a concussion, you know, at the tender age of 14. You know?
Juan was making records, and Derrick made his first record. And I wanted to make music too.
Kevin was able to put a lot of hybrids into a style. You know, he wasn't seen as just being, you know, this kind of techno guy. He did house, he did, you know, vocal things, he did all kinds of stuff, and he went a lot further creatively, I believe, than what Derrick and Juan have been able to do.
So I went from being underground to having commercial success, but I think because of the timing, because of the vision, because of the sound. It was a lot of things that played important roles in that success.
Super nice guy. Anyone could walk up and talk to Kevin and have a conversation with him.
You know, without him, I think that techno wouldn't be anywhere that it is now.
Derrick May is a very animated character. Perfect, Tim.
Derrick May came in as the prima donna from fucking hell.
Very opinionated.
Super macho, super hyper, master, techno, knucklehead.
He has this persona for the media, and then there's Derrick, and they're pretty different people.
Me and my boys was like, that dude's an asshole. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And a couple of people just wanted to sock him because, you know, he was shooting his mouth off.
Because he would say, you know, why the fuck you ain't doing it this way? You know, why the fuck you want to do that? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? You know, do it this way. Why are you stupid? You know, to anybody, it didn't matter who the fuck it was, you know.
He's the most unique out of anybody I know, probably. Derrick, he's got personality traits that everybody wants, and he's got some that nobody wants. He's a classic artist.
I've been knowing Derrick since middle school. When I moved to Belleville like in 9th grade, and from Detroit.
Kevin, I'm out here in Chicago. They got great music. It's a great scene. And I'm moving back to Detroit, you know. Let's hook up. I seen that he was really into the music. He was into it before I left, but his level had changed of the music. He's seen something that I was unaware of.
Although I started making music 5 years or 7 years before Derrick started making music, he was always around. And he always watched the process, and I can remember him always saying to me, one day I'm gonna make a record. You know, he always said that to me, and then eventually he made his record and he done real well.
And he had a roommate, Art Payne, and they were making music, and they asked me to come over and listen to it. It was very different. It was techno. There was no such thing at the time. But here I was listening to this music, and I thought it was kind of good.
I have the very drum machine where Strings of Life was produced on right downstairs.
He was trying to find whatever warehouse space he could get his hands on, and whatever sound system he could get his hands on, however he could get his hands on it, to hold these late night dance-a-thons, basically.
And then look what he did. He blew up worldwide. I always thought he was great.
The first record I ever bought was The Who, the Tommy album. Don't ask me why. I mean, I have no idea why a black kid from the city, his first album would be a Tommy record, but I wanted that record.
One of the second nights I met Rich, we went to an after party that Derrick was playing at, and I was introduced. It was cool, you know, hey Derrick, how's it going? I like your music. And the second time I met him, he remembered my name. And I was very flattered that such a famous guy like Derrick would remember little old me.
Derrick opened up his doors and his heart to myself and a lot of people. Derrick is a very open guy.
Derrick, on the other end, he brought out the artistic development and the musicianship into what I was doing.
Derrick has always been very motivated to make his music part of the mainstream, to be part of something that you could turn on when you wanted to be part of something that you could go buy, you know, in a store, and not just for his own economic elevation, but for just the elevation of the music. The man is rabid about that music.
Well, normally the process for me in writing a song completely overall is I get butt-ass naked. I put some hot oil all on, you know, and I shake it up real good. And I sit on down with some baked beans and some lemon heads. And I get down, Boston baked beans. And I get down, I be farting, and I be making tracks. I'll never tell you my theory to making music. That's a secret, man. Next question.
I liked what he was doing artistically, not just wanting to make music for the sake of making money.
He has this energy that is so buoyant, and it comes through in his music.
Quit talking about Derrick May, because he said some nice things about me, so I won't go off on him no more.
The old Eddie Fowlkes thing rises his head again. I went to high school with Derrick and Kevin. Eddie didn't go to high school with me. Because of that, Eddie is not included in certain discussions.
Eddie, I have the deepest respect for Eddie Fowlkes. He was right there at the forefront with us all.
I don't think I met Eddie until maybe after my second or third record.
Eddie, of course.
Man, of course you don't forget me, man. Eddie Fowlkes, you know what I'm saying, man?
And
How good you wanna look? How good you wanna look?
Hey, I was good when I came on my mama's womb, boy. He's quite a character, you know.
Actually, Eddie lived with Kevin and Derrick on different occasions before, so they know Eddie.
And then Juan, brother-in-law, got out of Jackson prison. He didn't have a place to stay. So I looked out for the kid. So he said, folks, for looking out for me, I'm gonna put you on this tip. It's a credit card scam tip. Okay, this is the true story, all right? So he put us on the credit card scam tip. My roommate was Derrick. So therefore, we started ordering equipment, everything, all types of shit. So we started breaking the houses and setting up shit so, you know, so you can get the equipment. So UPS man come, get your shit, run out the back door, get in the car, you're gone, right? So I had turntables, everything you want. I was the man. But, you know, Derrick couldn't figure out what the fuck we were doing.
That's what happens, and I think that maybe during that time period, him and Derrick must have fell out, because he has a tendency to fall out with you. And when things started happening, you know, if they had an opportunity to like not include Eddie or say, see, you should have been cool, they used that to work against him. Derrick more or less had the inside track, and he left Eddie out.
But it never bothered me. You know, it bothered me, but you know, all this came as a spiritual thing and being nice to people. So, you know, I just knew a matter of time it's gonna come up. I'm gonna get my props. It didn't take me to that deep end, like, you know, oh, I wish that negative shit. I was so high, and I had smoking some bud, and I was mixing. I wanted to make this mixtape, and I just left the fader in there. And you know how when you're high, your shit be going. And I knew what these two songs were, but when they came together, I said, damn, that's the third song. He says, hey, he said, I want you to write something in that record for me, you know? I said, okay, Eddie, what do you want me to put? He says, yeah. He says, I got all these loops in there, you know, I got a loop here and a loop from there and a loop.
I want you to put Luke Jack Mother Effer, you know. I said, okay, all right, Eddie, I'll put that in. And, you know, I thought about it after he left. I said, you know what, I could be a Luke Jack Mother Effer too, you know.
Everybody knew that if it weren't for Fowlkes, it wouldn't be a domino effect. No Carl Craig, no Kenny Larkin, especially no fucking ass Richie Hawtin.
Not to take anything away from Derrick, Juan, or Kevin, because the three of them deserve the credit that they got. But yeah, Eddie was involved in those early years.
It wouldn't be none of this shit, you know, but it was a spiritual-led base. Don't laugh, man.
That's funny as hell.
I'm not on the block. I built the block with Juan and others. You know what I'm saying? So that is the thing that I'm trying to explain to you.
The Music Institute was started by 4 young guys with just a heavy-duty background in partying and house music. Myself, Alton Miller, Anthony Pearson, and my brother-in-law, Frank Moore.
They would rent out space in these buildings.
And it was in the inner city, downtown. There was a lot of black people going to this Music Institute, which was where Derrick, Kevin, and those guys used to spin.
Most clubs at that time in Detroit was either punk, top 40, or alternative type things, you know, and then here comes the Institute, which was new, it was different.
But it was electronic music. And that's where the music got its real, that's where it vaulted from one level to the next.
It was new to everybody.
This club was like a shrine overnight. People came from nowhere with no promotion. They just came.
You know, my brother and I waited there, we got our memberships, and we went in and we danced because we knew we loved this music. And we knew that was the only place around the area. And at that time, one of the only places on the planet that you could hear this type of music that pure.
We didn't know who we would cater to. We didn't know what the heck would happen.
I mean, this place was open from midnight until 6 in the morning.
They let the kids out of the place at 6 o'clock in the morning, sweaty and beat up.
And there was no drugs in there. Kids smoked their weed, they had their drink before they came in, and it was all love in the building.
I had no idea it was as influential as it was at the time. Derrick has had to sit me down and say, George, man, this is what happened.
It was really beautiful. And it was truly the first real underground techno club in the world.
Wow, is that right? That's incredible.
It was just a dark hole with a strobe light, and it was rocking. I think one of the things that probably also had a big impact on how we got here is Electrifying Mojo.
There was a guy named Mojo. I only get a minute. So with this minute, I hope I can try to get as much as I can in. Mojo was more than an inspiration. He was a door. And he opened and out came all these weird, creative things that just like fell on us and somehow, ooh, I still got like creative pops.
They're coming for me right now. That's my limo. And Mojo's in the limo, as a matter of fact.
My name is Electrifying Mojo. I spent my life as pretty much an observer of life. I had a rare opportunity to take all of those observations and convert them into music every night on the radio.
Basically played what he wanted to play.
And he was playing Prince and Peter Frampton and all that kind of stuff.
85, 86, I was listening to Juan, or Juan's music was being played on Mojo's station, or program, heavily.
It was always about the music. Is it hot or is it not? And if it was not, no amount of money or influence could interest me, period.
And you couldn't really have you couldn't really break a record in Detroit without him playing your record. So he was that powerful.
Yeah, Mojo was the one that discovered Jeff Mills. Of course, he was the wizard then. He became Jeff Mills later.
He knew he was playing to black people, but he insisted upon playing this music anyway, because this is not what black radio was playing during the day. He went completely against the grain, and he had #1 ratings across the board.
People like Juan Atkins, Derrick May, Eddie Fowlkes, Kevin Saunderson, all those people, you know, they proved everybody wrong because they were able to be vocal enough to say, hey Mojo, we are listening. And that gave me a lot of inspiration and a lot of encouragement. So, you know, as much as they say I inspired them, it was definitely a reciprocal process.
Neil Rushton, that he would eventually be our manager, myself, Kevin, and Juan. And he said, I would love to have you come over here and talk to you more about your music and see if we could develop a relationship and try to help you get a record deal. I was floored.
As far as I'm concerned, he was one of the first outsiders that actually came into the circle and was interested in the music and actually had a business direction for it.
You know, because actually New Photo was the record that Neil Rushton came over here and picked up. That was the first record he actually heard, which was Derrick's record.
I talked to my mother. I said, should I get on the plane? Should I buy my own ticket? She said, it's up to you. You do what you think is best, but I think you should do it. I said to Kevin, what do you think I should do? Kevin said, do it. Pay the money, go. Juan said, no, don't go. Don't do it. If they can't pay your way, you don't go. Now, I actually would normally weigh Juan's decision more than I would weigh even my own mother's decision at that point in my life. I decided to go. I got on the plane. I went to England. I paid my own money for the first trip to meet this man who would eventually help us do many things, remixes, productions. He would help Kevin Saunderson eventually get his inner city deal where Kevin made Big Fun and Good Life and was going to sell 6 or 7 million albums. He would help Juan get the remixes and the production he wanted and the sort of press and respect that we needed. We would get the major article in Face magazine, which really just launched us. So it was a good thing to get on that plane, and that was a good day.
You know, when you getting into the music business, you're gonna get screwed over early on until you know. Until you know, you don't know.
It's like Neil kind of made us turn against each other. It's like, you know, when the money came into the picture, it started off, we were all cool, we were all friends and stuff. Like I trusted Kevin to make right decisions. I kind of trusted Derrick, but you know, once he brought us over to the UK, everyone got greedy, and he kind of fed off that, I think.
And that tension that existed between all of the egos was part of it. Not necessarily a fun part of it, but it was a part of it. And those guys went at it on a constant basis. Backbiting, backstabbing, shit talking. Who could spin, who couldn't spin, who cleared the floor, who didn't clear the floor, who knew the true, masters, what their interpretation of the music was, what was his interpretation of the music. Did he have a clue? Did he have a clue?
I think, a lot of entities was like splitting us up, and we didn't know how big this music was blowing up over in Europe. Derrick knew, Derrick was the first one to go over there, so he knew. So, it was more like, trying to put how can I say it, trying to control some shit he didn't know how to control.
Well, about the second wave of techno, definitely have to go with Rob Hood, Claude Young,
Shake
Shakur, Underground Resistance.
And that's a big crew, that's a big list.
Mike Banks, Jeff Mills, Rob Hood. They kind of woke people up to a darker, harder edge.
When I went to Berlin the first time in 1991, I walked into Tresor. I walked downstairs and I walked into the most intense dance floor I had seen outside of Detroit. And they were playing one of my records. And I walked through the crowd, through the smoke, and who was playing it? Jeff Mills. It was one of the most powerful experiences of my life.
Mike Banks and I, we had made the very first release from Underground Resistance, which was a vocal track called Your Time Is Up. I took it home to my mother because I wanted her to see why we were staying up so late at night. So I let her hear it, and she listened to it, and she said, it's nice, but it needs more bass. So I thought, you know, I think she's right, you know. So we went back and we remixed it again, and she was right, and it sounded much better.
Mike and the UR posse, probably, like, you know, without those guys, for sure we wouldn't be here, because in the early days, Plus 8 and UR were really kind of the driving force for a little while. And we had a little bit of, you know, Mike even says it now, it was like a little bit of sonic warfare going back and forth. They were shooting records out that were blowing our heads. And every time we thought we had come up with something really amazing, they'd shoot something back to us. We'd go back to the studio, I'd be like, Dan, man, we gotta make something better.
Mike Banks, who is somebody I admire a great deal, and one of my musical heroes.
I remember doing gigs, Mike Banks and myself, for little to no money at all. But it was the love of the music that kept us striving, you know, kept us going forward.
He's got a personality on him. Mike is a man's man. He don't take no shit from nobody, you know. And one of the most amazing things that Mike Banks has done was to invent and develop underground resistance. And the whole sort of mentality behind underground resistance is a real relation to the city itself. Because there's this mystery and this mystique about Detroit from the outside looking in. You know, it's as if it's a city with tumbleweeds, and just like people just sort of, you know, like the gunslinger comes to town mentality. I could remember going to Italy once, about 10 years ago. People were going crazy over underground resistance and they weren't even there. It was as if somebody came along to Italy and just took a helicopter and just dropped a ton of t-shirts in Rome. You know, because every other kid I saw on the street had an underground resistance t-shirt. It was like almost like a cult. I guess you could say underground resistance is the sort of the Arkham Asylum of the techno thing here in Detroit. You know, it's where all the guys go when they sort of want to touch the other side.
The rave scene kind of came in contact with Detroit City around '93, and it really kind of, you know, literally and figuratively brought new life into the city. It seems like the size of the party is really important, and that has its own problems, of course. It starts to become less about the music and more about a production. You know, that didn't mesh too well with Detroit techno culture. And they're breaking up one right now, and I think one of the people that helped define what Detroit raves and what the Midwestern feeling was all about was Richie Hawtin.
Started doing parties was at a key pivotal point in kind of the history of American parties and raves anyway. I was coming back from Europe at that time, going to places like England at the Lost Parties, going to Tresor in Berlin, and I was, you know, seeing that and reminiscing about the Institute, these dark black boxes with speakers and just like music. That's what it was always about. And so the reason we started doing parties in Detroit was to get back to, you know, the original concept. And in a way, you know, our parties were a little bit anti-rave. They were, you know, it was just fucking huge show in Vegas, a strobe light, and because it became so pure again, they became really successful. suddenly we went from 500 to 1,000, 2,000 people at the Packard building. You forgot who you were, where you were, and why you were there, and it became about this beat, this environment. And 8 hours later, we spit you out and you went home.
So we love Detroit techno.
Yeah.
We love techno.
Purists in Europe that you can still go play in front of 5,000, 10,000 people that they want to hear good music.
They treat DJs like superstars over there. It's really different, it really is. And then you come home and they think your name is Larry and you're a drug dealer.
A lot of them can walk down the street here in Detroit and people don't necessarily know who they are.
I think it's huge because once again we've touched the world. I mean, some of the artists that you see on this wall being exhibited, I mean, they're just back in Tokyo or London or Paris, doing shows, performing. They're in demand. People know that they're from Detroit. People know that this is really the mecca of this music, and that's huge. It's a huge statement for our city. Following the Motown sound, now it's techno.
The big difference between the scenes between the U.S. and Europe is that Europe has a real support level for the club. We don't have. We don't have beer companies, Amstel, Beck's, whoever it might be, supporting or backing a nightclub.
I think techno's a different story over there. I think the music has a life of its own and has a bigger presence in Europe.
Music, because it's music, is one of the only things that I feel that humans have that transcends everything. Language, culture, anything. So you can, especially when it's instrumental.
My life, Derrick's life, Kevin's life, Kenny, Richie, all these guys, our lives are flying on airplanes.
I just played in Bosnia, South Africa.
All over Europe, Belgium, France, Netherlands, Austria, Swiss, Germany, and the United States.
Turkey, Russia, I played in Jerusalem, South America.
In Berlin, you can still get away with some shit, and that's special.
I've done thousands of gigs. I've played in airplanes, I've played in bomb shelters, I've played underwater almost technically. I've played in the middle of a pool surrounded by water, people splashing water on my records, and I didn't like that because I'm really anal about keeping my records clean.
I am, myself and Derrick May, driving 3 hours through the Andes Mountains. We saw the stars, we saw the moon, we saw everything. I don't think you can get better than that.
The most special moments of my life was when I played in Macedonia. We went for dinner, went to a restaurant, we sat down, the guy put 4 plates down for everybody, nice guys. And I ordered and they spoke in the language and food came. It's just a dish for me. I'm like, where's the rest of the food? And the guys say, they all look at me. They say, oh, we don't have enough money to eat here. We could never eat here. We brought you to eat. And that was heavy.
The future of techno is new faces and new voices.
Everyone has a studio and everyone has a label. It's much harder to establish yourself as a DJ, producer, or whatever. It's so hard.
Ghostly came about as a mental idea. Our approach was more like, let's do music, let's make it exciting, let's have fun. But the label really happened in college when I met Matthew Deere at a party and saw him play techno, talking to him about music, becoming friends, DJing with him, hearing his live music.
I'd like to consider myself a dance artist. I mean, that's what I got into this for, was to watch people move to a certain sound.
gonna be a lot more music, a lot more techno music, but the innovators will rise. You know, those with credibility will rise.
People are going to rediscover techno in a big way coming up in the near future.
Actually, I hope it will become a little more commercial so people can have a little more respect for it and not look at it as just this underground thing where you can go into a dark place and pop a pill or whatever and go to cyber la-la land.
It's so many facets of the music, you can't stop it. It's gonna show its head, you know, in a big way.
I believe that a lot of people live off the blueprint of what we did, and that's really flattering. That's cool. That makes us feel wonderful, but that doesn't take the music to new levels.
I believe that the next wave of electronic music is coming from some black kid that we have no idea, and he's going to get a laptop and he's going to stumble on all this software and all these programs, and he or she is going to be the next thing.
It's still a very young genre, and it's still defining itself and going out to all the possible extremes.
Once you make music, once you do an art form, it's no longer, it's yours. You created it on that level, but it's no longer yours. You know, it's public domain. It belongs to whoever can get their hands on it. So all the passion and desire and love that we had for what we had done, and we got the great crowd, and oh, we got this real thing for the city because, you know, we hate the city, but we love the city, and this is passion, and we're on a mission, and we're gonna do this. We forgot that there's a such thing as the post, mail, trucks, airplanes, shit flies, travels. Somehow, you never know whose hand it's gonna end up in. You don't know where it's gonna end up in the period. Never dawned upon us that this would go across the world. Just never even thought about it.
I'm not taking credit for the advent of electronic music. I mean, of course, electronic music was here way before I started making tracks, but nobody was calling it techno music until I started calling it techno music.
You know, they are very modest and even in some cases quiet people. They've, you know, let this monster loose on on the world, and you know, there's no stopping it at this point.
That those guys really like pioneered it in the direction that it is now. They started with, you know, 4/4 beats. They brought it to a 12-inch vinyl format, and we're like, you know, the DJing culture of techno.
Not only are they these kind of figurative leaders of this sound, they're still very relevant and very good musicians and DJs.
And then when we finally had our chance to express our opinions upon the world, I guess it must have sounded like some alien shit, you know? And that's why we're sitting here today.
Love takes me away. Love takes me away, away, away. Too deep to understand, mysterious as the darkness. Your heart is hiding low. Take me away. Love, take me away. People take me away. Lord, take me away. Lord.